think our fifth week. First 2 weeks we didn't go. We kind of did an overview of some of the habits, but we're on the third habit. Put first things first. So I got a few big ahas out of this, and I'm listening to it again today, and I'm gonna listen to it tonight. The third is where most of us camp out in: activities, interruptions, some calls, some mail, some reports, some meetings, procrastinate, pressing matters, popular activities. I put feel good stuff in there. On page 168, if you got this book, and we're going to come back to this before we end here in 50 minutes, but he asked you to answer 2 questions. So just think about the answers to these 2 questions, if you would. What one thing, Artie, welcome. Question 1 that he asked you to think about, and then we'll deal with later. What one thing could you do that, if you did on a regular basis, would make a tremendous positive difference in your personal life? Think about that. And then question number 2, in your business life. What's one thing you could do that would make a positive difference in your business life and in your personal life?
Danny?
Yes, sir.
I'll jump in. It's for both of those. Use the power of no. We don't use the word no enough. So we take on stuff that we shouldn't do or not capable of doing, don't want to do. I had a pastor one time tell me, you're volunteering for something that you shouldn't be doing, taking someone else's job that God laid out there. And we jump into that. And I mean, that really hit me like, wow. So I'm trying to be careful when I accept something, but it's okay to say no and do it in a professional way, because you're opening it up, either a better fit or the fact that you're not taking your time. I can't get the time back. That's what's most valuable. And so that I've tried to use that in a professional way, but it's also personal when you say no to things that, you shouldn't get involved in, shouldn't spend your time on, whatever.
Yeah. And sometimes you're you kind of said this, but other people need to be doing stuff, and some people will just allow you to do anything you want for them. and if you're going to do it, they can't do it. Yeah.
So when I give you an easy example, people ask me to practice law. The answer is no, I'm not an attorney. They go, oh. Now, I'm happy to work with the attorneys, okay, and the client, but they think that they can't you just pull a contract off of Google right quick? No. So that and Purdy's fine, because it's like, I'm not giving legal advice, but I'd love to work with their attorney. But people get into that where their friends are going to help them, and their friends help them with tax law, and the friends mean well, and they're wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Danny, I think that, let me take a minute to explain what I'm trying to say here, but I think it's living a life of integrity. And what I mean by that is integrity. The root word for integrity is integer, which is a mathematical word that means whole and entire and complete. When I say integrity, what I'm saying is what I say, what I do, and who I am as the same person. So I can't be one way at business and one way in my personal life. I have to be the same behind the covers, behind the door. So to me, living a life of integrity and exposing in your business life what your true personal gifts are, that's how you serve your community, if that makes sense. So to me, it's not living a disintegrated life, by living a life of integrity, by being who you completely are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And some people don't get that. I was meeting with a coach recently, and he said, what is your subject matter, or what do you want to accomplish? I told him, and I said, and he asked, in your personal life or in your business life? I'm gonna break it down to that. And I said, it's the same. And he actually tried to argue with me about it. And, and I get it in some ways that we will, I have to be maybe tougher with employees about, my love with employees is tougher love than my love is with just me and my wife. Okay. Or, in my personal life. But when, if we did a mortgage loan together, what you see here when we have, you'll meet at Slab Barbecue, what you see there, what Tom and I, together and see each other at church, it's the same. I'm the same Danny while I'm doing a loan. You walk in my office and I don't see you there, and I get it. So,
as to further the example there, I play in the cybersecurity and managed IT space. But really what I do is build relationships. That's who I am at the core of who I am. So if I'm doing anything separate from building relationships and trying to close a deal just to close a deal, it just doesn't work for me. I can't live with myself.
Yeah.
So it's always about the process of the relational. It's always the development of the relationship. And that if you have a good product for a need that they have, the natural part of that is to close the deal. But it's not, the stuff we learned in the sales school. Well, shake your head, yes. Blow your head, no. You've all been through that, and assuming the deal. No, it's the best thing for you, because in a relationship, your best interest is in my train of thought. So
right.
That would be an example of what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, very good. Let's jump into here on page 170 or 168. I love how he's framed this here. And again, this is the first time I've been through this book in any detail in 30 years. But he says habit 3, which is the habit we're in, putting first things first, is the personal fruit, the practical fulfillment of habits 1 and 2. Habit 1, which is being proactive, says you're the creator, you are in charge. It's based on our 4 unique human endowments of imagination, conscious, and independent will, and self-awareness. Habit 2 is the first or mental creation. It'll begin with the end in mind. It's based on imagination. Then it goes on to say, habit 3 then is the second creation, the physical creation. So anything that's created is first created, we talked about earlier in the book, is created first in the mind, and then we create it physically. First, there's an idea. And the idea is, typically put on paper, maybe it's a plan and whatever. And then habit 3 is the second creation, the physical creation. It's the fulfillment, the actualization, the natural emergence of habits 1 and 2. It's the exercise of independent will. And boy, he really focuses, he's got a couple of pages here about the independent will toward becoming principle centered, which is what you were talking about there, Terry, being principle centered. It's a day in, day out, moment by moment doing it. Goes on to say habits 1 and 2 are absolutely essential and prerequisite to habit 3. So to do habit 3, I think he's saying, not trying to contradict him, anybody tell me, but I think he's saying that if you're going to do habit 3 correctly, if you're going to be principle centered with habit 3, you've got to first be proactive. 2, begin with the end in mind, know what you're going after. And then number 3, then habit 3, you can start creating it, okay, the right way. Great information here about management. Guys, we're trying to finish this in this week and 4 more weeks. We could spend all year. I don't think anybody that's on the call today was in, there's about 9, 10, 11 of us that went through Think and Grow Rich. Took us all year. We literally we missed 3 weeks in the whole year and went through that book. We started off just going to go through it in 6 or 8 weeks. We spent all year in the book every Thursday morning, and I think we could do this also. So anything here about the management versus leadership on page 169 or whatever page it is there?
So Danny, I was thinking that 3 words came to mind when you were reading that, and that is, we've all heard this before. It's conceive, believe, and achieve. And the conception part is the part where we use our imagination and our mind to think into a concept or what we're going to conceive. And then the belief action is, do we really believe what we're conceiving is something we can do? And we get that system up, and then we put that plan into action with achieve. So those 3 words for me are pretty big, because if I can conceive it and believe it, then I can achieve it. And that goes right along with being proactive, using your imagination, and being able to stay principle oriented throughout the process.
Right. Yeah, that was Earl, I believe Earl Nightingale, that said, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe can achieve. Now, you don't need to get weird, but some people can go take it to an extreme that and give a lot of if, but within reason, it's absolutely true. When you think about it.
And I meant within reason. I meant within reason. I didn't say I'm going to make $1 million this year and have no plan. Okay, I get that. Yeah.
I'm not going to cover, unless somebody wants to cover some of the 4 generations of time management. If you've never studied this before, Tom and I have a man named Jordan Rayner, and in his book, One Thing, not One Thing, what was the name of it, Tom? Master of One. And in that book, he starts hitting on a little bit of time management. And then he's got a new book out about time management. A couple other books that he references in there. What's Best Next? Some recent authors have really gotten into the history of time management. They refer back to Dr. Covey here, but we're going to jump to what now they call, what these guys call generation, or the 4th generation of time management. And
hey, Danny,
yes.
Can I add to something I heard he said before we get there? My
Sure,
apologies,
sure.
but
No, not at all.
I didn't realize I had a microphone a while ago when I was talking. My apologies. But I forgot who said it, but it's something around proof of your desire is in your pursuit. And that's really, it encompasses exactly what Hurdy said. You know, if you don't take action on something you really don't believe, but if you don't believe, you won't take action. So those 2 things walk hand in hand. So proof of your desire is in your pursuit. That tells you if you really believe something or not, just as a side note there.
Yeah, it does. And that goes back to Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, that in essence, what do you desire? What do you desire?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to give up to get what you want? And it all starts spinning from there. And most of us desire things, but we're not willing to give up something. Sometimes it's time. We just need to give up time and start pursuing it. So here, I'm going to, on the area he's talking about, the 4 generations of management. He says there's an emerging 4th generation. Now, he wrote this book back in the mid 80s, early 80s. And or right 92. And he says there's an emerging 4th generation that is different in kind. It recognizes that time management is really a misnomer. The challenge is not to manage time, but to manage ourselves. Satisfaction is a function of expectation as well as realization. And expectation and satisfaction lie in our circle of influence. Go back to chapter 1, look at that circle of influence versus circle of concern. One's always going to squeeze out the other. The more you're concerned about something, the more you can influence things. The more you're influencing and focusing on influencing your concern, that circle of concern is squeezed out of the way. Rather than focusing on things in time, fourth generation expectations focus on preserving and enhancing relationships and on accomplishing results. So we finally get into what that matrix, the 4 quadrants. And he starts off talking about quadrant 2, which is where we want to, that's, if you're being effective, you're operating in primarily in quadrant 2, important but not urgent. Anybody jump in at any time here? I'm on page 173. Importance, on the other hand, has to do with results. If something is important, it contributes to your mission, your values, and your high priority goals. So somebody that is I've heard criticism about Dr. Covey and others such as him because it's too focused on results, too focused on money, and there's people involved. Well, he answers it right here. This is the 30th anniversary edition. The only rewrite in the anniversary editions, the 25th and 30th, was the forward, and then this book, the 30th edition, has an extra a part to each chapter that's at the end, but no words have been changed from the very beginning. He said, if something is important, in other words, one of those activities talked about there in quadrant 2, if it's important, it contributes to your mission, your values, and your high priority goals. We react to urgent matters, while important matters that are not urgent require more initiative and more proactivity. We must act to seize opportunity to make things happen. If we don't practice habit 2, if we don't have a clear idea of what's important, back to habit 2, begin with the end in mind, the results we desire in our lives, we are easily diverted into responding to the urgent.
Well, I'll just talk a minute about my crazy job that.
Okay. Whoop.
Put my video back on. It's hard not to get sucked into the urgency of everything going on. And it was so bad that they stopped us from, as a specialist, calling into the hub. So we had to send in everything in a summary report, and then they would answer us that way, because customers were calling, and if it was taking longer than a minute for them to be answered, and they felt like we were clogging up the system. No, this is our job, But anyway, I can tell that, I don't know if it was really procrastinating, but I've been doing, whoops, that's my phone. I'm gonna just, sorry. And then the reps will call because they're getting a sales goal, and it's coming up to the end of March. And if they're not getting their fast start, and they've got all this sense of urgency about, hey, this dose isn't shipping, it isn't going through. And I was last week kind of buying into all that. And over the weekend, I took a little step back and said, you know what? I can't really fix and get the things that are my purview done when I'm busy answering all of their stuff. But I'm in a new job, and so I'm trying to kind of find my way, and I have to build relationships with these people. I can't just tell them a flat no, like I might in 6 months, in the sense that they're just going to complain to their manager if I'm not helping them, right? But I'm getting better at saying, look, I'll have time at 3:30, I'll look at that. And they seem okay with that. If I set a time when I'll get back to you. And so I'm getting better at, like, just their urgency is not mine. I just had one, he said, I'm going in that office this afternoon. I need, and I'm like, well, you could have called yesterday that you were, or texted me this morning that you were going, not at lunchtime. So I'm going to have to manage other people's expectations, I guess, about urgency. And that's something, I've always been the Lone Ranger selling. The last 3 years, it was just me. I didn't have to balance other people's stuff. So that's my challenge with that number one, where everything's important and everything's urgent.
Yeah. There's a little small booklet. I've got one laying somewhere around here. It's about the tyranny of the urgency, tyranny of the urgency. I think you can Google that and find a free PDF on it. And I think one of the sayings in it is that your lack of planning does not create an urgency on my part, something like that. It sounded like what he did. He didn't plan for his day very well, and now he needs it immediately.
Hey, Danny.
Yes, sir.
The old saying is lack of proper prior planning does not constitute an emergency on my part.
That's it.
Now,
Yeah.
I had a CPA that worked for me. She used it all the time because you're pushing over on me and you didn't plan. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah. Terry?
I'm good, man. I just sitting there kind of giggling along with Tom there. Yeah, I've heard that a bunch of times. I had but the beauty of that also, it creates, when somebody hasn't planned properly, it creates a demand for services as well.
Yeah.
For instance, this deal that I got yesterday, a CTO was new on the job, and he had his system admin turn in his notice for 1 week out. Well, his hair was on fire to try to find something, but I was able to step in and then calm the storm. So, but the beauty of that, it created him being on fire, created an opportunity for me.
There you go. Yeah.
We took it and ran with it with calm though. All right, let's just slow the boat down. Here's where we are. This is what we need. We need to get these things signed. Let's get this moving forward. And just gave him a plan of attack on how to move forward in a patient in swift way as well.
Yeah. Cool. Talking about quadrant one, Cubby says on page 173 towards the bottom, as long as you focus on quadrant one again is important and urgent, crises, present problems, deadline driven projects. As long as you focus on quadrant one, it keeps getting bigger and bigger until it dominates you. It's like the pounding surf. A huge problem comes and knocks you down, and you're wiped out. Sound like that what happened with him? It'd be good to know the whole backstory on all of that, wouldn't it, Terry? You struggle back up only to face another one that knocks you down and slams you to the ground. Some people are literally beat up by problems all day, every day. The only relief they have is escaping to the not important and not urgent activities of quadrant four. Pretty interesting, isn't it?
So Danny, it's like having a urgent button attached to you, right? Everything's like push it. Everything's urgent from the time you get up to the time you go to bed at night, and nothing's over in these other three quadrants. You live your life on ADA, adrenaline, and all that stuff. So funny.
Yep.
I'm kind of like that.
Yeah, you're a whole lot better than you were 7 or 8 years ago.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're a lot better. He says, so when you look at the total matrix, 90%, this is the person we've been talking about, the 90% of their time is in quadrant one, and most of the remaining 10% is in quadrant four, with only negligible attention paid to quadrants 2 and 3. That's how people who manage their lives by crisis live.
Danny, I would even go back and say, when you have the first two habits correct and you are proactive, you have the end in mind, and you're moving in that capacity, you're not going to fall into that urgency very much. You will. Stuff happens. But to me, as long as you're being proactive and you are working from a clear vision, that's really a non-issue at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump with that. I'm going to jump. He says effective people stay out of 3 and 4 because urgent or not, they're not important. They also shrink quadrant 1 down to size by spending more time in quadrant 2.
Yeah. Danny, if I can get a client to just divert 10% of their time from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, they're actually shocked at what the results are, because they're forced to do this long-term planning and prioritizing versus they're in quadrant 1 and they're playing whack-a-mole. They're just trying to put out the next fire. And so just a little bit of time diverted there, they see the value. It's hard to get them to do it, but when they see it, they can move more away from quadrant 1.
So on page 176, with the time management matrix in mind, take a moment now and consider how you answered the questions at the beginning of this chapter. What quadrant do they fit in? Are they important? Are they urgent? My guess is they probably fit into quadrant 2. It'll be a great exercise to do later and really work on that. And this is on page 176 in the top third of the talking about that. And look again at the nature of these questions. When I first did it this morning, answered it, went back, realized they weren't. So I had answered it outside of quadrant 2, got a better, and then reread the questions that went, okay, I don't know if I read it wrong. Anyway, it was a very interesting exercise. Let's jump over to bottom of page 177. He's been talking about here the 80-20 rule before this, and the Pareto principle: 80% of results will have 20% of the activities. And that's always just messed me up. So true, but just trying to okay, what the 20% of my activities, how do I get a better grip on those? Just do those and quit doing more things. So he says here what it takes to say no. The only place to get time for quadrant 2 in the beginning, when you start working this, is from quadrants 3 and 4. You can't ignore quadrant 1, although it will shrink in size as you spend more time with prevention and prep in quadrant 2. But the initial time for quadrant 2 has to come out of 3 and 4. To say yes to quadrant 2, you have to say no to other activities. Then this gets back to at least Tom and Terry talked about this. A quadrant, and I'm on page 179. A quadrant 2 focus is a paradigm that grows out of a principal center. If you're centered on your spouse, your money, your friends, your pleasure, or any intrinsic factor, you will keep getting thrown back into quadrants 1 and 3, reacting to the outside forces your life is centered on. Even if you're centered on yourself, you'll end up in 1 and 3, reacting to the impulse of the moment. Your independent will alone cannot effectively discipline you against your center. Read that and just, our will always fail us. Eventually, our will always fail us. Really good stuff here, talking about moving into quadrant 2, working through the generations, and talks, he's talking more and more about that. But then he gets into the quadrant 2 tool, and it's, out of this, some of us been around for a while. We remember the Franklin Covey planner. It started off as a Franklin planner, and then Franklin bought Covey, Dr. Covey's organization, and in essence, what the Franklin Covey moved into. So that's what he means here by the tool, having a tool. And a tool is coherent, balanced, Quadrant 2 focused, has a people dimension to it, is flexible and portable. And of course, he's written this book before we have our smartphones. So he's talking about having a planner, having, and how you do that. Let's talk about that for a minute. Who uses, just do a show of hands. So there's 3 choices for your time management. Do you use paper or digital or a combination of both? Who uses paper? 1, digital, both. Yeah. And so, Terry, tell us about how you manage. I know you've got it all together, so let's hear from you.
Oh, Lord, don't say that. No, I use both. Was on mute there. I use both because I have to deal with my team, and we're in different places of the nation. So we're in Florida and Kentucky and Cincinnati and places like that. So I have to have that. But I also, at the end of the day, the last thing that I do before I walk out of my office at 5 o'clock or 6 or 7, whenever that is take the information off of that digital and write it into my planner. And I'm using right now, I've been using the Full Focus planner for the last year or so, and I really like it because even though it doesn't say quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, it focuses on what are your 3 priorities for the day. If you get those done, it's going to be a good day.
Is that Michael Hyatt?
I believe it is. Yes, it is. And then it has the time, but I go ahead and write down because there's something about, to me, writing it down. It just, to me, I'm old school, but I have to kind of deal with digital because of the world that I live in. But it enables me to write it down, and I can remember it better that way. But I also, to add into this is the principle that I'm working on for that week, who I'm trying to become as a person, and that proactive mode. So those are the things that I use. But and again, I don't keep up. The only thing I keep up, I have to use the Outlook because of the schedule within my team. So they know my schedule. But I take that information, write it down as well, and then I add to it what my 3 priorities are, and then my list of events. I know that Artie's gone. He writes out his 48 tasks for the day on his legal papers. So I don't go that in detail. My focus is just what are those 3 key things that I want to do. And I cannot stop until I get those 3 done.
Hey, Danny.
Yes, sir.
Something that worked for me is I used to have insomnia when I was corporate. I mean, when you get home at 9 o'clock and go to bed at 9:30, you don't go to sleep always. But one thing that worked for me, and it was given to me by my doctor versus a prescription to sleep pills, is if you ever thought about writing your thoughts down on a piece of paper next to your bed, and then see if it works. And it worked greatly for me. I'd wake up, I'd have something in my brain that I just felt like needed to be taken care of. I'd write it down, I could go to sleep. And I might do that 4 or 5 times during the night. And one thing I did when I was corporate, even though I did all the digital stuff too, because my teams did, always left, starting working for my dad, I would leave a notepad on my desk with anywhere from 5 to 15 things that needed to be done. And once I put it on that piece of paper, I knew it was not going to leave until I did it.
Right.
And so to me, writing is good, even though I've used digital to work with, as everybody has, people all over the country. But I like to write it down. So
yeah, I'm a writer, and I mean, I know a couple of guys my age. They're so digitally engaged. It scares me, and I know a couple of millennials that they write everything down. So anyway, I typically plan my week on Sunday nights, and then every day I print out a copy of my calendar out of Outlook. I keep everything, and then I keep it in front of me, and I've sat here to look, and it's normally right here on this little stand-up thing. It's not there, so I'm not sure what I've done with it. I do lose those things. So I'm gonna move on through this.
Hey, Danny,
Yes.
Danny, one
Yeah.
quick point on that
Yeah.
before you move forward. One of the biggest things that keep us held back during the day is for us to do a lot of digital is we've got notifications turned on for everything. I recommend you turn them off. You know, if they're important, you can always come back and look at it. But the notifications thing, if you've got them set up on Facebook and all these different platforms, they will bombard you all the time, and you will be totally out of whack. I mean, just turn them off.
Yeah.
Just turn them off.
I do that during when I'm making my, we call it 10, 2, and 4 calls. I'm gonna make 10 outbound sales, calls every day into my database. And I'm gonna try to do them at 10. If I don't do them at 2, I make them at 10. I do them at 2. But what I don't get done, I do at 4. And we teach. I do it. We teach you to turn off everything. Turn off your emails. Turn off everything. Your CRM. You need to be able to send an email through the CRM. If you need to send something right then, do not go into your. Just turn off your.
There's a book called The One Thing, and I forgot Gary Keller that wrote that book.
Yeah.
And he talks about having a 4-hour block first thing in the morning or whenever your alive time is, if it's in the morning or at night, and blocking that completely off, not letting anybody into your circle. If you need something to eat, have a refrigerator in that area and get where nobody can bother you and focus on those 4 hours, those most important tasks.
Yeah.
And there's calls, especially in sales world, making those outbound calls or whatever. And then the rest of the day just kind of flutters throughout. But yeah, another thing too, I wanted to add too on the digital, Bruce, that's a great point because I journal every night and I journal every morning. But the reason I do that is because it gets my eyes off of the digital. It gets my eyes off of the light. And that helps me sleep. And it also helps to empty my soul, so to speak. Because I'm the kind of guy that wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got a list this long of things to do if I don't do that. So I put that in place about a few years ago, and that has helped me tremendously sleep. You're right.
I was running Berg Electric for about 3 years. I was pretty busy. And my receptionist had me pegged because what you were saying earlier, Danny, is blocking off that time. Keller Williams, I've read his books. I work for KW now. I've met Gary. I would walk in and I would go open up my office, maybe get a cup of coffee. Then I'd go back to the receptionist desk, and she had me pegged after about a week. No interruptions for 2 hours, right? Unless I had a pre-planned meeting that had to be happening. And of course, there were people that could override that, out of California or somewhere, but that she knew that I just had to set my day up, get everything going, take care of that 10-point list that maybe I put on my desk, and start without being controlled. Even when you're the manager of the branch, you are somewhat controlled by the employees. And I always wanted to be accessible to my employees. So I didn't mind that in the big picture, but also had to have my private time. So anyway.
Yeah, that right there. I'm that way. My role right now, I'm working with my team. I'm redefining a little bit my role. I've got, there's 16 of us on the team. And so I'm kind of, part of my role is to be available to them, but I'm stopping what Lencioni calls a sneaker meeting. Well, let's finish up real quick here. Page 187, he talks about daily adapting. Guys, there's so much stuff in here. Even if you cut out his stories, and that's one thing I thought about. I'm gonna go through and just mark a line through the paragraphs or his stories and examples, and then just really dig in here. But daily adapting. The quadrant 2 weekly organizing, daily planning becomes more a function of daily adapting, prioritizing activities, and responding to unanticipated events, relationships, and experiences in a meaningful way. So, and then the weekly schedule, and we're jumping over it, and then he gets into living it. Returning once more to the computer metaphor, if habit 1 says you're the programmer, habit 2 says write the program, Then habit 3 says run the program, live the program. And living it is primarily a function of our independent will, our self-discipline, our integrity and commitment, not to short-term goals and schedules or to the impulse of the moment, but to correct principles and our own deepest values, which give meaning and context to our goals or schedules in our lives. That's on page 190, second paragraph up from the bottom, and it might be the most important paragraph in this whole chapter. Living it is primarily a function of our independent will, our self-discipline, our integrity and commitment, not to short-term goals and schedules or to the impulse of the moment, but to correct principles and our own deepest values, which give meaning and context to our goals or schedules in our lives. As you go through your week, there will undoubtedly be times when your integrity will be placed on the line. The popularity of reacting to the urgent but unimportant priorities of other people in quadrant 3 or the pleasure of escaping to quadrant 4 will threaten the overpowering important quadrant 2 activities you have planned. Your principle center, your self-awareness, your consciousness can provide a high degree of intrinsic security, guidance, and wisdom to empower you to use your independent will and maintain integrity to truly important. I like this, and because you aren't omniscient, how you say that word?
Omniscient.
That you can always know in advance what is truly. You can't always know in advance what is truly important. Because you're self-centered, you can do that with an inner sense of peace. Because you're paying, I skipped part of that, but because you're a principle-centered person. And you will need to subordinate your schedule to a higher value. I don't care who you are, that's good stuff. Then he moves on, talking about the 4th generation of self-management on page 192. It's principle-centered, it's conscious-directed. It defines your unique mission, including values and long-term goals. It helps you balance your life by identifying roles, and it gives greater context through weekly organizing. And in here, he's made a big deal about weekly organizing. Some of us have been through the 12-week year on here. A couple of us have at least in some form or fashion. Beth is the boss of that thing. And I've had probably 40 people go through the 12-week year with me, and I've never had anybody lock into it. And because she locked into it, helped you succeed. Right, Beth?
That's absolutely true. And in fact, I'm kind of struggling with that now, being in this new role, trying to figure out, like it's hard to set your vision and your objectives and get what you want going when you're not even trained on the job. So it's I've got a very different job, but you know what? I like being challenged, and I'm, that part is good and true to my principles. So it's all good. And this kind of little discussion helps me remember about those habits and not getting into the urgency. And, and the truth is, I've been super kind to everybody who's, upset. So, but I had a nurse today tell me we're the worst group she's worked with. So that felt really good, right? No. So, and it wasn't aimed at me because I was problem solving for her. But yeah, that was a fun call to my manager. And guess what? Now she's moved up to the white glove treatment. And I'm sort of like, well, why doesn't everybody get white glove treatment? Right? And you're screwing it up. So, but yeah, 12-week year is so good because you're not, and with this job, I can't even focus past next week. So that's working okay.
Yeah, and actually, as I've been going through this, and I see so much of this in the 12-week year, and then the 12-week year puts a good framework around it. Guys, he finishes up here about delegation, different types of delegation, and it's all great. And then finally, some application suggestions. And then Sean Covey talks about new insights on habit 3. And Sean is very engaged in the Franklin Covey organization. Carries his dad's name, but been challenged. He and Stephen M.R. Covey that wrote the Speed of Trust, their dad trained them well, and they've taken it and took it all to a new level. So it's some really, really good stuff. If you have teenagers, Sean wrote the book, The 7 Habits for Teenagers, and took some principles that his dad, he'd learned from his dad when he was a teenager, and then as his kids moved into his teenage years, took that. It's all really, really good. Would love to hear from you. If you take the little assessment, the urgency index, I took it a couple hours ago, took about 5 minutes, did it real quick, maybe 3 minutes. And I scored a 45 on which is in the strong urgency mindset. I got some work to do. So 46 is the urgency addiction. And I probably scored one of them, at least one of them, too low, because I said, but even before I looked at what I've been reading and listening to this book, so I just picked it back up, mid-morning, and I'd already told my team, I am. If you need me today, you need to. From here on out, I'm working on my time management around my emails. I'm addicted to looking at emails to figure out what problems I can solve. Then I don't get things done. So then it picked up, and of course, very well the Holy Spirit speaking to me, because this is what we're going to be talking about today. If anybody wants to talk about that, let's talk about the urgency index. Finally,
Danny,
yes.
I was just going to say, denial's a real fun place to live. Okay, I love it. Especially when it comes to survey tests. I love to make myself look good. Yeah. Denial's wonderful.
The whole awareness of what's the highest level of unawareness is being unaware of what you're unaware about.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of scary. The older I get, the more fearful I am of what do I not know about that I should know about.
So, I'm reading Tom's mind right now, and he says, no.
Yeah.
My number one challenge, Danny, is my clients are highly educated. Okay. You hear the period coming, but they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
That's the battle. That's the struggle I try to help them with, because just because they got, 14 degrees or whatever, I got somebody's got 8 degrees, doesn't matter, because they don't know my area. And so we all have that. And if we didn't have that, probably wouldn't have jobs, but I mean, that's how it goes.
Yeah. That's a great point. And it is scary.
Can I share very quickly? I have a client who has a MBA, a law degree, and about a dozen IT certifications. And he is in charge of security for a U.S. federal courthouse. Ready? He got hacked personally. Into my story, right?
Oh my goodness.
So
Terry
that
down just shaking his head.
So Tom, that goes back to a guy like me that's in marketing, taking care of everybody but the stuff around me. And so while I can make other people very successful, you go look at my stuff and you go, how does he do what he's doing? Well, because I don't ever focus on myself. I'm always focused on my clients. So I get that, right?
I just had this vision of his posting up with his password on his monitor. I mean, it flashed my mind for a moment, just a little humor. But it was like, this guy's got, I mean, he is intelligent, but he just his own worst enemy. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Guys like that need somebody around them just to clean up the mess.
Punch him.
You're talking about delegation. I had just an enlightenment moment today. So I've been just gearing up. I'm doing a we did I have a client in Houston who is a healthcare intermediary between doctors' offices and the insurance companies. They do all the billing and all of that type of stuff. And we ran pen testing and their security risk assessments that they have to have as part of their HIPAA compliance throughout the year. So I send out the pen testing results. I send everything to him with all the remediation actions on it. And I'm like, man, what does this mean? What does this mean? So, I mean, I'm a relationship guy. So I'm talking to the team today and we're meeting tomorrow. And they're like, Terry, why don't you just do you sit in there, make everybody feel good and let us do the talking around the remediation. I'm like, buddy, sounds great. Completely delegated. I'm just going to walk in there. I told him, as my own subject, I said, I'll just be the eye candy for the meeting. So bad joke, sorry. So, but it enabled me to that to listen. And also you have to be humble enough to delegate to some people, because sometimes you want to be the man on campus and don't want to give anything up. You want to be the person of control. So you have to step into that same thing and say, hey, yes, delegate this and you do it better. Because those guys can explain the technical aspects of every part of that remediation process. And probably as I start studying now to the end of eternity, I would never understand it like they do. So just give it up, let them do it, and just do what I do, stay in integrity, and just show the love.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, a lot of times it's just that, and we could talk about that for a while. Well, guys, we will let you go. Team, thanks for joining us. We probably were talking so much you couldn't talk in, but I'd love you keep joining us and contributing.
Yeah, thank you to having me.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah,
We're glad you're there. And a quick reminder, if you guys want to save the contact in the chat, go down to the 3 little dots in the bottom where you do the chat at, and you can save that to a document without having to write it all down. Okay?
all right, guys, we'll be posted on the What About Books podcast and YouTube site. Last week, week number 2, I failed to turn the recorder back on. So if anybody wants to redo week 2, want to deep dive into something in there, I'll be glad to do it. All right. Thanks, everybody. See ya.